Hey, what's up, guys? It's the HPR Chronicles Podcast with Shakur and Smith. It is our last show for Black History Month. It's Friday. And what is today's date, Brother Smith? It's February 26th. It's the last show for Black History Month. And today we're going to talk about Fred Hampton, guys. Yeah. And the reason why I'd like to talk about him, and Smith agreed, is because he was a very important historical figure. And the movie just came out. I'd like to touch on the film as well. So we're going to give you a brief history of who he was and stuff like that and talk about the film. And then Smith and I will share our opinions on the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton and how he died in the whole 9 yards. If you're joining us for the first time, it is the HPR Chronicles Podcast with Shakur and Smith. I am Shakur. He is Smith. Smith is a veteran of the Army Reserves, currently works for the VA. I'm in film and TV, and we both have a love for history, politics, and race, hence the HPR Chronicles Podcast with these two handsome gents. Now, if you want to follow us on YouTube, if you like to watch us, it's ICT Group Digital. Please subscribe. And thank you, like I always say, for listening where you get your podcast. We have a slogan. We say we're not about pro any race or anything. We're just pro truth. And if the truth offends you, we're sorry, not sorry. That's what we say. You know what I'm saying? With this Zoom delay, it's kind of funny.
The lag, yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, Smith, thanks for checking in. How are you doing?
I'm good.
This last week of February.
It's been a very knowledgeable, interesting month. You know, just with my friend who posts the different things on Facebook that I get to read. And stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Exactly.
Kind of also getting ready for the summer. My son graduates 8th grade, so
nice.
You know, make arrangements to go to that area where he's be there for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember when Layla graduated 8th grade. You know, it's one of those moments. Well, that's cool, man. What was I going to say? Yeah, so I'm getting this, just so you know, from the National Archives. So it's archives.gov, and I will put the link in the description, as I always do. It's just a short and sweet little excerpt about who he was and stuff like that, and it kind of makes sense because he didn't live that long, which we'll get into. So
real quick, just to say there is a thing about him on Britannica. And it's a little bit lengthier, but the other one you're about to read, it pretty much, you know, brings everything that I think you want to hit on. So
yeah, exactly. And what I'm going to do is put a lot of imagery in here too. So you're not going to see much of us, but you and I, but there'll probably be a lot of imagery, you know, and and the shorter it is, the easier it is to do those images. So I like that. I didn't even see the Britannica, but I'm sure it's awesome. I like that, their source of information and stuff like that. So anyway, let me get into it, guys. In case you didn't know who he was, I mean, this guy was probably as important as, you know, I hate to say it, but even Malcolm and King. And I mean, the funeral they had for him after his death was unbelievable. I mean, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't know much about this guy until this film. I have to be honest. When you think of the Black Panther Party, you always hear about Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale and those guys. You know what I mean? Yep. But I didn't know much about Fred Hampton at all. You know what I mean? So I have to admit that. So once again, the movie kind of educated me on exactly who he was. And like I always say, when we get to present something that I can learn from on our podcast, I like that as well. So here we go. Fred Hampton was born August 30th, 1948, and he was murdered December 4th, 1969. He was actually assassinated, and we will get into all of it. Fred Hampton was an active leader in the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, leading their youth council of the organization's West Suburban branch. Hampton joined the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party in November of 1968. He quickly rose to a leadership position, becoming the deputy chairman of the Illinois chapter of the party. He organized rallies, established a free breakfast program, and negotiated a peace pact among rival gangs. As a rising leader in the BPP, the Black Panther Party, for those who don't know what BPP is, Hampton became the focus of an FBI investigation. And I'd like us to touch on why, too, with that, Smith. On December 4th, 1969, Hampton, along with his fellow Black Panther, Mark Clark, was murdered. On the evening of December 3rd, 1969, William O'Neill, who was employed by the FBI to infiltrate the BPP, slipped a powerful sleeping drug into Hampton's drink, then left. Officers were dispatched to raid his apartment. They stormed in and opened fire, killing his security guard. Then they opened fire on Hampton's bedroom, where he laid unconscious from the drug with his sleeping, almost 9-month pregnant fiancée. After the gunfire, he was found to only be wounded and not dead. Upon that discovery, an officer shot him twice in his head and killed him. The remaining 7 Panthers who were not killed were all arrested and indicted by a grand jury on charges of attempted murder, armed violence, and a variety of weapons charges. These charges were eventually dropped when, during a later investigation, it was discovered that the Chicago police fired 99 shots while the Panthers only shot once. Wow. So that's so that's a brief history of who he was for our listeners, if you didn't know. And is there anything you'd like to add, Smith, before I touch on some of the key points in this excerpt?
No, go ahead.
Okay. One of the first things I like to point out, I was watching an interview with, was it Daniel Kaluuya? How do you say his last name again? Kaluuya. I was watching an interview with him on The Breakfast Club, and they were talking about how, your kids should watch it. And it's funny, I had my daughter this past weekend, and we always try to catch 1 or 2 movies while she's with me for the weekend. And she wanted to watch this, and and it was interesting. She had said, "Yeah, I'd seen the stuff about it, and I want to watch it." And one of the first things she said after it was finished was like, "Dad, why don't they teach us this stuff in school?" And I was like, "Of course, they're not going to teach you about a positive revolutionary in school, because they don't want you to have images of what the Black Panthers were really about." You know what I mean? And if you watch the movie, and this has been documented, this organization in particular fed people, did breakfast programs, did peace rallies and stuff with the rival gangs. It literally brought the community together, and it was empowering our people, to live a better life and be positive, and also protect themselves and know your rights against police brutality. Back then, just like you see now with George Floyd and everyone else who's been murdered by the police, they were having the same problems back then. And the Black Panther Party grew out of a need to protect the Black and brown community, and even the white community who was in a similar state, as you'll see if you watch the film. But of course, their focus was our people, because you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. But the Black Panther Party was a really positive organization that did a lot for the community, and it was disbanded, just like Malcolm X was murdered, and King, and everyone else who ever tried to do anything positive for the Black community. So that's what I wanted to say before I touch on some of the things that really stood out to me about Fred Hampton.
So I would like to add that when Layla asked that question, we all think, like, why isn't it being taught in school?
Yep.
And one of the biggest reasons is the violence, and how the man was killed was perpetrated by state officials, government type of thing. The FBI had gotten an informant to get into the ranks of not just the Black Panther Party, but specifically to be as close as he could be to Fred Hampton
Fred
as
Hampton,
possible.
yeah.
They were so worried that Black people were going to come together, rise up, and not that we were going to just, try to beat and do things equal or for our fair, what should have been given to us anyway, but that we would get somehow advance and actually perpetrate violence against them.
Right.
Because all the violence that has been perpetrated against Black
against us.
So they were so scared,
Yep.
So you can't, now that I look back, the more and more I think about it, like, why don't they? But it would make white people feel bad or feel wrong for what had happened. And obviously, it's most white people do not like to feel like that. So the idea of having it specifically in school, I mean, think about how, might be going on a tangent, but just
it's fine. No, keep going. It's a podcast.
Think about how I was watching something, and a person said, it was a white person who said the way they were introduced to Black people before meeting anyone, and if it's in history class or if you read about history when it's all introduced, is slavery. That's the introduction of Blacks to the United States, is slavery.
That's an interesting point.
And then you hear little things, and then the next biggest thing is Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. Really don't even talk about Malcolm X, but then and civil rights, and it's almost like, Martin Luther King did these peaceful protesting stuff, and civil rights was done.
Yeah.
So you know what, Black people, you guys are good. You should be happy. You've gotten what you wanted. No one ever breaks down and goes and says that after slavery, when it was ended in 1860, Emancipation Proclamation. And it's not that even with that slaves were free. It was supposed to be that slaves were, anyone who was born in America was considered a citizen. So whether you were Black, brown, white, whatever, if you were born in the United States, you were a citizen of the United States.
Right.
Even though that was supposed to happen for another 100 years, 1960 is then when civil rights happened. So during that time, what no one ever, rarely talks about is, the Jim Crow laws, just the laws that were used to still keep Blacks oppressed.
Reconstruction, redlining, everything. Yeah.
Segregation and separate but equal. And then eventually they were able to get that tossed aside, and the idea that separate but equal was truly not equal. So then it finally ended. And I say all that to say, it almost feels like no one has an idea what to really fight for right now. Like Black Lives Matter, it's about violence against young Black men that are unarmed and stuff like that.
Similar to Black Panther. I don't know if BLM does community stuff like they did, like feed kids and all that. But it's interesting you say that, because when I was watching the movie, it made me think of BLM today. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah. But
the only thing I feel like, and I've been really thinking about since we did the reparations
episode,
podcast, is that is the actually it feels like that's the last piece of the puzzle that really kind of needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like so it almost feels like there's no Black leaders out there. And I know there are, but there's nothing that they really have a big platform that's being discussed. Like, this is what Black people want. And we've discussed that in our thing. Like, we all need to come to an agreement on what it is that we want.
Yeah. And Diddy and them are trying to do it, man. Diddy and Killer Mike, have you seen it? The Black Power Party and all that they're forming. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So but that's okay. So obviously something's being formed now. I'm
just saying people are trying to do it. You're right. And that energy is out there. And people are saying they're feeling what you're feeling and what we've been feeling. And I'm glad powerful figures like a Diddy is actually trying to do exactly what you're saying now. And I've joined. I've signed on. I'm just waiting to get the emails and what we're gonna do next and stuff. But it's very important, man. You're absolutely right. Yeah. We need that sense of unity. Go ahead.
Yes, and something to kind of rally behind, but it needs to be the final
like an
rally
organization, our own party, like with some organization that we can go to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the government as a unit, as a collective, and say, this is who we are, this is what we want. And without that, we're not going to get anywhere. So I'm happy they're actually doing it.
I'm not necessarily saying, I think a party would be great as far as a political party that can move,
Right.
and but unfortunately, you're always going to have Uncle Toms, you know what I mean? That aren't going to agree with, and they're going to say that. And I don't want to ever have us all targeted as making things separate. But before I go back again to that, let's get back to Fred Hampton. I just wanted to say that one thing that was very, and you could see how the actor portrayed him, is that Fred Hampton had a great ability to communicate and talk to other people. And then at one point he started to create what he termed the Rainbow Coalition, which is still kind of used today. And it was an alliance of the Panthers with other groups organized around racial, ethnic, or ideological affiliations, bringing together groups that otherwise would have had almost no positive contact, including the Puerto Rican Young Lords Association, the Poor White Young Patriots Organization, and the Blackstone Rangers, a street gang. So the Rainbow Collection, and that's where I wanted to get back to our statement of him bringing different ethnic groups together, especially poor white people, Puerto Ricans, like
poor Latinos,
and gang members. That made him a threat, not just to any random, but to the powers
the
that
American
be.
government. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. FDR himself, head of FBI, they brought him down. I think I read somewhere, thanks for adding that Rainbow Coalition part too, Smith. And I think I read somewhere that it was the only assassination sanctioned by the American government and the local, in Chicago. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was like, and for those who don't know, the family sued for like 80 something million, and they ended up getting like 1 point something million out of the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, they literally took this dude out for all the very reasons you just stated. You know what I mean? And one of the things I wanted to touch on was his.
Oh, just real quick.
Go ahead.
The family received 1.8 million from the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government. None of the officers, agents, or officials involved in the raid were ever convicted of crime. That sounds pretty familiar.
That sounds familiar, right? Exactly. Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I mean, it's been going on since back then. And one of the things that really blew me away about Fred Hampton, unlike King and X and Garvey, all these other historical Black figures, and Frederick Douglass, was how young he was, man. Imagine how smart and how powerful he was at 21. Like what he knew and how he spoke to the people, and his charisma, how he was able to bring the people together, the gangs, whoever he could just walk into a room and just state his case and say what he means and mean what he said, and got people to rally around his cause and the cause of what he was trying to do. And another thing I wanted to touch on about his character too, which I think is really important, is how selfless he was, and how he was about the people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? How he was about the people. He was selfless.
Not just trying to improve just Black lives, but lives for everyone in that community that were tossed aside, that was being ignored.
Yeah. He was about the people. I love the way he would state that. You know what I mean? I think it was one of his speeches I saw on YouTube. Oh, and they actually had it in the film too, where he said, what was that quote? Where he said, if you're afraid to die for the people, you're dead already. And I'm paraphrasing.
Oh yeah.
But it was something to that fact, man. And dude, just his conviction and what he what he meant and what he stood for was just unbelievable. And to know that he was 21, like what? Like, you know what I'm trying to say?
But if you think about it, Martin Luther King was in his 20s.
But he was in his 20s. He was a little older. Yeah, he was a little older, but he was in his 20s
he was,
too.
he was older 20s.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that it was not only did you have, a lot of things were going on or being done by young Black men, were being putting themselves out there. I'm not sure exactly how old Malcolm X was when he passed away, but they still were. And then because of everything going on, a lot of college students who did a lot of protesting and putting themselves out there. Yeah. And obviously, and if people were to look back even to Martin Luther King and some of the protesting that was done there was kids involved.
Yeah.
As young as 7 years old. And if it wasn't for them knowing that they deserve better, taking the risk to go out there, having that stuff filmed and seen, I can only imagine where we'll be right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I don't want to touch on Bill O'Neal too much, but to me, it was just another case of one of our people just selling us out, But with that said, even if the FBI hadn't paid Bill O'Neal to infiltrate and help set Fred up, they still would have gotten him. You know what I mean? When you think about it, I know everybody's upset that Bill did that, and which granted I am too. It's the point well taken, but they would have ended up assassinating him anyway. It would have happened some other time. You know what I'm trying to say? With or without Bill. Of course, Bill just made it a lot easier, but
correct.
It would have happened.
I was just going to add, it could have taken years as opposed to
the
short amount of time that it did to get to Fred Hampton to take him out.
Right. But it definitely would have happened, and that's the sad part about it. That they would have assassinated him anyway, whether Bill did it or he didn't do it. You know what I'm trying to say?
And it feels, it's bad, and I'm sure. Well, some of the interview with Bill doesn't seem too remorseful, but I think it also seemed like he just was he kind of was misled in a way. The guy was making him think this stuff is, what we're doing is going to make life better. He's a bad man. He's got to be taken down. And the movies, there's the good part. There's a very interesting parts of the movie, and you feel the humanity of all the characters to a point.
Yeah. He what was I going to say? It was something about Bill O'Neal. Yeah. This is what I wanted to say, was that he felt so guilty afterwards. He ended up killing himself in the 90s. I think it was 1990, because right after the Eyes on the Prize 2 came out, he committed suicide because from my understanding, they said he just felt really bad about what he did, which they kind of tried to show an inkling of with Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah.
In the film and stuff like that. But I heard he felt really bad. He couldn't live with himself after doing that. You know what I mean? And he ended up taking himself out. So before we go, just wanted to touch on the film real quick. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. And I can give my perspective as a fan and as a filmmaker. I was hearing all these really great reviews. And when I watched it the night of my birthday, February 14th, I wasn't paying that much attention, maybe the way I should have. And I kind of had mixed reviews, as you and I spoke about. But then when I watched it again with my daughter, I really saw what all the award buzz and Oscar buzz was all about. It's a really well-written, well-directed, well-acted piece of work. And it definitely deserves all the awards it has coming if it ends up getting anything. So that's what I wanted to say. It's a great film, and just the way they captured it, essence of who he was in that time period in Chicago. It was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I wanted to say to close it out. Anything you want to add?
So, no, again, like I said, I think, just to reiterate, I definitely agree. And I'll look into and you did tell me about it. I'll look again into the new party that you said that's been formed. There does, and like I said, I think everyone needs to come together and go about the reparations. And if it's only $500,000 per person to every African American whose lineage could be traced back to somehow to slavery, or who has even been living in the United States, who may not have actually been originally a slave, but had the disadvantage of being here during those extra 100-some years when we still weren't being given our fair chance. But anyway, the point is, there's a lot that just by giving money, and I know we all talked about education, that would also be into effect, and that would be more along the lines of having history in the classrooms, include more things that was attempting to make life better for not just Black people, but for everyone. That would include women's rights and stuff like that. So that's where I wanted to finish.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks for adding that, Smith. And I wanted to say too that the thing that Diddy is starting, it's not like, it's not a political party in the political sense, like a Democrat Republican type deal, but it's called Our Black Party, and I'll put the link in the description, guys. It's ourblackparty.org. But what it is just, it's not going to be like the DNC or the RNC. What it is, though, is like an organization that we could all be a part of, like I was saying before, that can kind of have a voice and go to the government with an agenda, with a real agenda, with real solutions, and have a real voice. Because if you show some organization, you'll be taken seriously. And if this is done correctly, it'll really be successful. You know what I mean? So I'll put the description in the I'll put the info in the description, but it's called Our Black Party. And if you haven't joined, you should join.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So and you can go on the site. It talks about the values and the agenda and the whole nine. I mean, it's exactly what you're saying we need to actually do and what we need to have. So anyway, guys, thanks for checking in. I really enjoyed this show. This will be out, Friday the 26th, our last show for Black History Month. But just because they created this Black History Month, keep studying, keep educating yourself about our history, no matter what race you are, throughout the entire year. I'm constantly studying, constantly traveling, constantly learning. It's not just about February for me. You know what I mean? I'm constantly
and it's not just
on
Black
that journey.
And it's not just Black history, it's American history. It's just some of the figures are going to be Black.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, subscribe, guys. If you don't subscribe on YouTube, it's ICT Group Digital. Hit that notification bell so you'll know when the episodes are coming out. And once again, thanks for listening where you get your podcasts. And thank you for following us on social media. All that stuff will be in the description. And we will see you guys in March. Thanks for checking in, Smith. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good show. The BPP. That's what it is. The BPP.
Yep.
You know what I mean? All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.
All right. Have a good one. Peace.
All right.